Six in the Mix proudly presents a Fix Your Eyes session on alcohol in the believer. All right, well, we're going to transition to Fix Your Eyes for quite a few episodes. We had been doing sanctification. We wrapped that up last week, and we're actually going to get into the first one of the first suggestions from a listener on this episode. Fix Your Eyes. We'll probably do a couple episodes on it, but talking about alcohol and the believer. So it'll be interesting to see different perspectives and kind of weigh this one out. And so just tonight, we'll start with a simple question. How did you or your family view alcohol growing up? And has that changed at all for you over the course of your life? Are you different now than you were maybe back growing up? Your perspective on that. And we'll go in the order: Jeremy, Don, Ben, Kenny, Ryan, and Matt. So as we start this topic, I'll start with you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we had zero alcohol in our home as we grew up, and that was kind of like standard for our entire family, and really both sides of the family kind of held to that standard, at least to what I knew, and so was never part of my growing up at all. Never had a strong influence of that at all, and even in our school. I mean, sometimes whether you go to Christian school or not, I mean, sometimes that kind of weaves in somehow and makes its way in. But I was never into and part of that scene or was exposed to that. And my first exposure to alcohol was actually in college. A friend who will remain nameless. We spent some time together and went to an apartment up in Minnesota, the Twin Cities, on a spring break, I think it was. So it wasn't on campus or anything, but yeah, it was my first exposure, and had a beer, and can honestly say I did not like it at all. Hated the taste of it, and but it so I had a couple beers just because, and so beers and pizza and watched some games, and so that was my introduction to alcohol. Interestingly enough, that kind of opened a little bit of a gate for me that was not expected in my life. Not that I've struggled with it, but there have been times privately where I have really desired to do that and to have that be part of my, maybe not my, obviously not my outward life. And I'm talking 15, 20 years ago when I was a little bit younger, and really didn't see too much of a problem with it if I could keep it under control and to myself, and maybe just between my wife and I, some wine or whatever. And I really never kind of settled on a foundation of what that should look like. And I had influences in my life that would say, you probably shouldn't have that in your home at all, and your exposure to your kids. And I've got several views that are close to people that I really love that have different views of having alcohol in the home and whatever. So I never did, but just to be kind of transparent with you guys, I had this longing and desire, and it was because of those times that I participated in that, and so just struggled with that, just restless and not knowing what to do with that. And it seems weird, I'm in charge of a school. Back then I was just teaching, and it wasn't something that, like, again, consumed my life, but just the thought of it. So when I was put in the place of being part of the official pastoral staff, I really had to answer that question for myself once and for all, for my family. And so I've just chosen to not participate. I have many friends and family that do. And it's not something that I look down on them for. I've never seen it in a context where it's been misused. Um, but I also know just personally my tendency. My tendency, I think, would be if I drank alcohol like I drank, drink Pepsi. I think I probably wouldn't be here. I think that would consume me. In fact, I know it would consume me. So that has been one of my real battles in life, just spiritually and for whatever reason, I've had to struggle with that and had to, in my mind, in my heart, battle with that. Um, I don't know. People have other struggles too. Smoking just doesn't attract me. Pornography, thankfully, has not been a vice that I have had to go to and been attracted to. There are other things I'm sure that have a vice on me, but one of the things that has captured my heart and my head, and I've really had to fight against, is that. So I'm very, very careful on where I go, what I do. And today, if I am in a situation like, for instance, next Saturday, I'm invited over to a party. Our men's basketball team won our championship in a crazy way. And I know that it's just going to be a spread there. And so how I deal with that, just so that I don't, find my excuse. No one's there. No one will know. So Amber's going to be right beside me. She's going to be right there with me. And so that makes it easy for me to be able to have self-control. If I didn't have Amber around and didn't have my kids, at the stage that they're at, I think I would probably find myself in a real battle with the actual content of it. So I'm thankful that the Lord has kind of taken me through that. I remember writing a paper in college defending that alcohol is not bad. And I wrote it in kind of spite of Pillsbury, to be honest with you, thinking, what, I mean, wine's mentioned all over the place. Don't be drunk with wine. Don't, whatever. And I don't want to take up all the time here because I know you guys all have probably better responses. But I've gone into that and I've waded into that personally. And I've had to answer some of those difficult questions with my own, appetites that I know that I probably may even face or want. And so for me, I've had to be very, very careful. I've just had to step very, very lightly in that. And, as a pastor, I am thankful that I'm surrounded each day with major accountability, and that has helped, eliminate some of those temptations to even start creeping in. I've also watched homes that have been completely destroyed by alcohol, both, just start out as a casual thing and just really turn to something that's been very difficult. And I've seen, even with some of the kids that we've had in our home through foster care, what damage that can do when it's abused, I'm saying. But sometimes, you just start down a path and you don't know, you have all the, proper intentions. This is never going to get a hold of me. It'll never be a problem for me. And so, and for some, it's not. And to that I say, great. But to others, it could be. And so I'm in probably one of those could be categories. So I have chosen in my adult life to be very, very careful.
Cool. I appreciate you sharing, Jeremy. Thanks. Don, how about you?
Well, yeah, you guys probably knowing my background don't and knowing our backgrounds probably don't find it crazy to think that alcohol was not a ever in my home growing up. In fact, it was very much taught against, never drinking. We always had the the old motto of "Don't drink, don't chew, don't go with girls who do," and so that's just kind of explains it right there, right? We stay away from that.
That'll preach.
Shake that bush.
But ironically, just like Jeremy, my ideas of alcohol or my beliefs about alcohol did not really become challenged until college. And I remember sitting in a classroom my freshman year at Pillsbury, and hearing a professor talk about social drinking and talk about lifestyle evangelism and all that kind of stuff. And this was completely blowing my mind. I've never heard this idea that even the idea that drinking alcohol was permitted. And so it really challenged my, the way I think about things. And fast forward a couple years later, I'm getting married to my wife, whose family is a whose parents I respect dearly and look up to spiritually, and they, they're a family that has alcohol at in their house, but it's not abused. I don't ever feel it is a issue. It's something I've never seen abused at all. I mean, it's just it's I would say a, if you could call it, a healthy understanding or of a system of how it's treated. And boy, that really challenged me as well, because I was like, well, this is, completely different than what I've been told about alcohol all the time, that once you taste a drop of it, you're addicted to it and you're never coming back, and you're going to be a wino out in the streets, and so, boy, it really, again, put me in a place where I was like, well, I've got to really look at this. And um and the more I looked into it, the more I realized, what I feel like the Bible teaches about alcohol. And I don't consider it a sin to drink alcohol. um I do consider it a sin to be drunk and have it consume you, of course. I think the Bible is very, very, very clear on that. And so, as of, if I, how things have changed, I don't um, see anything. I don't, for myself, I don't, don't consider it a sin to drink alcohol. Do I drink alcohol now? No, I don't. In fact, kind of like Jeremy's story, um, about 2 years ago, I was in a very dark place, and I was drinking alcohol to sleep. I was in a very dark place, and I needed something to get me to sleep, and I resorted to whiskey, and I drank, you know, and finally it just came to a head, and things started happening, and finally I said, okay. Jen was like, we got to stop this, and so, yeah, about 2 years ago, I haven't had, since it's been April 15th, I haven't had a drink of alcohol since. So, but it was something that was out of control, and something that was I was used to, to as a crutch to try and get to sleep. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, no, I mean, but again, it's something that I don't think is a sin to drink alcohol, but I do obviously believe it is wrong to abuse and can be very dangerous. Um, but I don't have an issue with people drinking.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Ben.
Yeah, so I grew up in a home similar to Don and Jeremy. We did not have alcohol in our home. It was not really in the groups of families we hung out with or those kind of things. I don't know if it was too much even in our church. I mean, obviously, I never went in and checked out everybody's pantries in their homes or whatever, but just yeah, it wasn't around much growing up. So I think perhaps like Jeremy and Don have shared, as you become an adult or through the college years, you really start to figure out what beliefs you're going to make your own, and where you're going to land on some of these things, and trying to, obviously read through the Bible and reflect on things that are real black and white doctrinal core beliefs, things that maybe could be more into the preference category or things like that. So for me, then also as an adult, I have people around me who I look up to as spiritual role models, and people that I look up to a lot, that they do occasionally have a drink, but so as I've kind of reflected on where I landed on this as an adult, I try to draw out some principles, and Jeremy kind of quickly referenced a verse where it says in Ephesians 5 to not be drunk with wine. As we've talked about through the sanctification, it says that fruit of the Spirit is self-control, right? So that's one of the things of overindulging in alcohol, or possibly overindulging in a lot of things, can take us out of that level of self-control. So it's something that's important to keep in perspective. But yeah, where I've landed on it, I don't think the alcohol in and of itself is wrong or is a sin, but it's something that I think Don used the phrase, you have to have a healthy respect for what it is. And if you read through the rest of the verses there in Ephesians, it talks about, be very careful, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk with wine, which leads to debauchery. So, when you even kind of think about that, you're thinking through, okay, what's going to potentially be a stumbling block to other believers? What's going to be a hindrance to my witness? What's going to be, there's a lot to consider, more than just looking for maybe a black and white answer here. But anyway, so where I've landed on it is, I don't personally believe that it's a sin to have a drink of alcohol, but overindulging obviously would be pretty clearly defined in the Bible as something that we should not do as Christians, and would fall into this category of a sin.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Ben. Kenny, our guest. What a great topic to come in as a guest, huh?
It is actually.
Talk to us. What do you think?
No, I was really kind of happy when I saw this on the agenda for a few reasons. One, it's hit pretty close to home with some stuff going on in my extended, or my family, and then some good friends that I've had that I've seen kind of battle through this, and it's a tough topic. So I'll start with the first question, which is, growing up, my dad was a Baptist preacher, as most of you, I think you all know. It's a sin, period. We don't have it. We don't do it. I mean, it was very Pillsbury. That was my dad's type of church, where everything was a sin and you just don't do anything. And but I kind of want to talk about that too, because I look back at some of our Pillsbury, some of the students of Pillsbury, some of the people that graduated with us, but really even my Christian school back in St. Francis. And it's so interesting how so many people have completely just completely left the Christian faith, and alcohol has a lot to do with it. I mean, it's unbelievable. Talking to one of my best friends in the world, and he says he pretty much doesn't believe anymore. And what I do know is that he drinks constantly. I mean, it's what consumes his life. There's this verse I was looking up here, probably totally out of context, but it also fits in Proverbs 31. They talk about the kings out there, not to drink. It says, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Again, way out of context, but the concept of, you just don't think the same when you let that consume your life. So the bigger question, is it a sin? I'm with Don and Ben on this one. I can't say that I categorize it as a sin, but I can say that I am grateful that that's not one of the vices that has gripped me, because I've seen it. And man, I tell you what, I had every opportunity to let it grip me. TCF, that's all they did. And like I said, I would have drinks with them, but it was always the foo-foo drinks, they call them. I was exposed to it the first time, ironically, not at college. I'd heard about some of the things that happened, with some of my friends, and I was surprised. I was, kind of still in that camp of, I can't believe they would even consider doing that. And get to TCF, I go on these trips and I see, everybody, that's all they're doing. Literally, that's all they're doing the entire week. It is unbelievable. But I see these people with these, it was a green drink. It was my boss, and she had this green drink. It was like, I'm like, oh, that looks good. I go, what is that? She's like, it's a Midori sour. I'm like, She goes, yeah, you should try one. Of course, the pressure. I'm like, you know what, fine. And you know what? It tasted like Kool-Aid. It was amazing. so, 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 but so that was kind of where, it started where, okay, yeah, I'll have some drinks. I'll have some strawberry daiquiris, some stuff that tastes good. Like you said, Jeremy, I mean, I tried a beer once and I can't understand why people would ever drink it. But the nuts and the bolts of it is, you know what, this is hit close to home. We've got a family member who's really struggling. And that kind of is what I talked about earlier. That's kind of what's caused a division in our family with how we've tried to deal with it. They want us to deal with it in a kumbaya, just love, 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 fashion of just love. And it's like, well, we've tried that for years. So we wanted to take a different approach that maybe would help. And it pretty much ripped that relationship away. So coming back full circle, I mean, I look at it and it's like, I have seen full hand the dangers of alcohol and where it can go. And I think the Bible mentions it over 70 times about having a drink of wine. And so again, I have a hard time saying it could be a sin in and of itself, but man, the path that it can lead you, because we are so weak, our flesh is so weak, and where it can lead you, I am so grateful that is not a vice that is connected to Sadie or I. Like, we don't buy alcohol. We bought 2 bottles of Moscato wine in our life, and both times we had one drink of it and ended up dumping the bottle 6 months later. We just don't have a desire, and we are so grateful that we don't, because of the damage we've seen it do to others. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing. It's good stuff. Ryan.
Well, I think this is now a full consensus, but like the rest of you, I grew up in a home in a church where it was pretty much forbidden to drink alcohol, and even tasting it, you just had to stay away, and that was in your best interest to do so. And it certainly seemed like a major sin if you got involved with alcohol. I mean, I think that's what I'm gathering. I know Matt hasn't talked yet, but for everybody who's spoken so far. So I guess that's the background I come from. And so the second question we're answering is, how are we changed now? Have we changed from what we grew up with? I think for me, as I've gotten to learn more, and you get exposed to more people, more teaching, you look at a scripture in a broader way. Even Jeremy mentioned doing a paper in college. I don't think I ever did a paper on alcohol in college, but you're forced to think more on your own naturally in a college setting, and then as you grow into the adult stage. So I think where I'm at now with alcohol and the Christian is, I agree that the Bible does not come out and say if you taste alcohol, you are sinning. So I agree, and I think my view of it as a young person was probably overblown to the degree that it was. Yet at the same time, I don't think it's a good idea for Christians to be involved with alcohol. I can share more later. Maybe the next episode I can get into the rationale for that. But just the transition from where I was as a young person to where I am as an adult, very, very little difference. But I do see a pathway, as some of you have described, that the Bible does not come out and say if you taste alcohol, that is a sin. So whereas as a child, I would say, oh yeah, you touch alcohol, you're in sin. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing. Again, similarly, growing up with you guys, a little bit of history will help though, because I think I saw a side of alcohol at a very young age that was pretty extreme. Now, thankfully, my folks were recently saved before they got married and they had me, but they had grown up and they were of the world. That they had drinks, they enjoyed that. It obviously did a full 180 when they came to Christ, and so that was not a part growing up, but it impacted me when I was 5. I had a cousin who was had 2 cousins, and my aunt were backing out of their driveway, and a drunk driver hit them. And my aunt was in a vegetative state the rest of her life, and I lost the cousin that was my age. So so she died, and then my other cousin thankfully was spared. She was I think maybe 1 or 2 at the time in her car seat, and she was spared. So I remember it was the first time I remember crying, like for like, not because I was spanked, because that probably happened a lot, but like the first time I remember just crying, because it's like, man, I lost, like she's gone, like it was just extremely impactful to me, and I knew the result was because there was a guy who was drunk, and I didn't understand all the things, but he was a drunk driver. And then we still had family get-togethers, and some of the family drank a lot, even at those get-togethers, middle of the afternoon. And I remember one in specifically, where one of the family members was so drunk it was obnoxious, and they had to like herd the kids away from him. And thankfully it was a wake-up call to him. And I think he scaled it back significantly. But I saw the effects of alcohol. I'd lost a family member early on, so for me it was like, that stuff no way. And so it never been a thought. The taste of it's not even that good to me. Now fast forward to the honeymoon, and we're down in Mexico, and the swim up bar, that's life changing. So you go up there and you can get you can swim in a tropical environment on your honeymoon, is fantastic, and you can get drinks at the swim up bar. And it was interesting because the alcoholic ones didn't taste as good as the non-alcoholic ones. But
Hold on, time out. I
Okay.
just have this thought going through my mind though. You're not a great swimmer though.
that's why they don't make the swim up bar deep. Like it's
Okay,
not
I'm
that
just
tall.
making sure. All right.
That'll be another story, Jeremy. Yeah, right. Oh, about swimming. Good grief.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I guess I enjoy it from time to time, but it's never a pull to do anything stronger than maybe than a drink, whether it's with some friends. I do want to get to maybe next episode talk a little bit about culturally, because where you go in the country, and Kenny, maybe you'll see this down in Florida, but I know we've got my brother-in-law is down in Kentucky, and that's culturally what you do. Like it's more accepted even within the church. So there's some significant differences there. And so yeah, I certainly don't believe it's a sin, but I was really again, for me, impacted by everything that you said. But for me growing up, just if that gets out of control, and I think probably like a lot of sins, but boy, that gets out of control, that physical harm can come to people. And then you guys alluded to it, relationships just devastated through it. And it seems like something that you can, you might not be able to stop once you start down that path. So to be very, very cautious with it. So yeah, I look forward to, maybe getting a little bit more into like the maybe cultural aspect, and maybe some biblical thoughts on that next episode. But some good thoughts on alcohol and the believer. Let's transition into Fix Your Eyes. We kind of queued up and learned a little bit about some of our how we grew up, and then how we feel now about alcohol and the believer last episode. And in this episode, we're just going to take a look at a couple Bible passages and maybe make a comment or two on these 3 Bible passages. And then just give a thought. And then actually we're going to transition. The next episode will kind of be like, how do we apply these thoughts, especially with whether it's culturally or in relationships, how do we apply our thoughts there? And I think that'll be interesting, getting the application of it next week. But we're going to take a look at 3 passages of scripture. The first one actually is I don't have a scripture reference necessarily, but you guys are all familiar with it. It's Jesus, his first miracle. He turns water into wine at the wedding in Cana. So I guess the question I'll pose to the group, and we'll just have a couple guys answer. If Jesus made, transition water into wine, which obviously no, wine's got a little bit of alcohol, then what could be wrong with alcohol then?
Well, I love this, that Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine. The dude knew how to party. Right, you're shaking your head. You don't think you could throw a good party?
Are you throwing up an amen there, Ryan?
You don't think Jesus could throw a good party?
Right.
Come on, man.
Hey, Ryan, the
I
details
thought
of
there was
that
gonna be a
story.
shake that bush.
Right. The details of that story, it was the best tasting wine that when he made the miracle, better than any wine they'd had during the whole rest of the feast.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
That guy's coming over to my next party. He's on my invite list. Yeah, you know, I love.
Who's on your invite list? Jesus or me?
I'll give you one try at the guess of it. Guess that. All right. No, I think. What was your question, Matt?
So the question is, if Jesus, turned water into wine, which probably had some alcohol in it, well, then what's wrong with alcohol? Like, why is there other passages of scripture we'll get to that give us warnings there? Like, it seems a little bit odd that he would kind of put this thing that seems a little bit contradictory.
I'll tell you my take on it. I don't think that Jesus made an alcoholic wine for this reason. If he had made an alcoholic wine, then those who participated in that drinking at the party or whatever, and could have become drunk, then he would have participated and aided in that and led them down at that road to sin. If it was truly a wine that would intoxicate to a level that was drunkenness. And so I personally don't think it was an intoxicating wine. But the argument that I've heard from all over the place is, well, what kind of wine was it? What did it taste like? Was it grape juice? Wasn't it? What was the content? What were those things? And to be honest with you, I don't think you can answer that question because it was a long time ago and they had different practices. And today we do things in distilleries and other places and with the sugars and other things that we put into those things, or however they make wine. I don't think that we're talking, the same thing. I don't see that. And I definitely do not see the principle or the precedent that Jesus leads people to sin. So for me, it's an easy answer. And I don't trip over that. I don't think there's anything to dabble in with that. I do think that there are people that will use this as a Christian liberty passage and make this a very, very, wide open discussion and use it in that regard. I think they're missing some of the point there. And that's just my thought.
Jeremy, I've heard that argument a lot, especially growing up. I heard that argument that the alcohol or the wine, I should say, that was produced or present in the Bible times may not have been alcoholic or may have been really, diluted compared to what we have. But I would combat that with, if that was the case, then why is drunkenness so much talked about in the Bible? I mean, the Bible is constantly telling us that being drunk with wine, or I won't say constantly, but I mean, we know that there are passages that I think Matt's going to refer to on this podcast that obviously there was some type of alcohol or something in this wine that obviously that made people inhibited with whether it be drunkenness, and so I think I just can't buy into that thinking that back in Bible times it wasn't as potent, or there wasn't as much alcohol. I think and I'm not saying that what Jesus Christ's first miracle had 40% volume alcohol content in his miracle, but I'm just saying I think that to say that alcohol is a different animal back then, I don't think is very accurate. I would just argue against that.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't see how there is a feasible way to test that at all.
Right.
And
right.
so I think both sides are left to go, but we really don't know.
You're right.
And so it could have been. Here's what I honestly think. If there was alcohol, which there could have been, I'll say that. I think somebody could have drank that whole barrel or that whole wineskin and they wouldn't have been intoxicated. That's so it could have had a alcoholic, fermentation going on or whatever the case may be. Fine. I just do not see how how Jesus could make that, and then somebody go get drunk, and then something happen because of the miracle that he did there. I just don't see the connection there. And so maybe I'm short-sighted on that. Maybe I just don't understand, all the details of that. But you're right. I'm okay with not knowing. And I'm not going to try to argue that, yes, I am matter of fact, dogmatically certain that there is no alcoholic content. I just know that God would not allow Jesus to lead somebody to a sinful act through that first miracle, or any of his miracles, or any of his ministry. He was calling people to himself and hearing the gospel, the good news. And so anyway, yeah.
I just want to add on to that. As I mentioned last week, I am opposed to alcohol. I don't think it's good for believers to be involved with alcohol. I mentioned that at the end of last week. And I'll just add a little historical perspective. And this was really drawn out by a message I heard by my pastor within the last year or two. You all, I don't know if any of you took the class Intertestamental Period with me at Pillsbury or not, but if you did, you were to meet a couple of brothers named the Maccabees. And so there are actually some historical writings in their name. So and these are not biblical books, so they're not inspired by the Holy Spirit. But there's an interesting passage in 2 Maccabees 15:39. It says, "Wine and water alone are not good." So what Jeremy was saying, and my understanding now is, as I've heard a little bit more, studied a little bit more, there was a mixture of water and wine back in biblical times, and the wine, the alcohol, would actually serve as a purifier to the water, because the water could be very dangerous, was not always sanitary. So the alcohol helped to purify the water. I don't know what the proportion was. It 3 parts, 4 parts to 1, 8 parts, I don't know. But I have a hard time looking at the book of Proverbs with all the caution against alcohol, strong drink within the book of Proverbs, and then Jesus lighting up a bunch of pots, barrels full of wine that is strong drink. I just have a hard time seeing that. And you can cherry pick various passages that might bring it into a positive light. I just don't think the alcohol today is anywhere near what we're talking about in biblical times in terms of what God, it's there, right? God created grapes to ultimately ferment and become this wine and alcohol, I should say. And so there's a cautionary line. So like Jeremy said, we don't know exactly what it is. I just can't see the cautionary point of view from the Old Testament translating into Jesus' first miracle, allowing everybody to be set up to get drunk.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
would just say it's always interesting when we try to, I'll try to go quick here, Matt, sorry, but
It's all good.
I think it's always perhaps a little dangerous to try to interpret the Bible through today's culture, right? So I think the way we view things, even in the United States versus other cultures from around the world, or even around the country of the US, there's cultural aspects to alcohol that impact how we may interpret some of these passages. And I think, Ryan, you also alluded to, we've got to take the context of the Bible as a whole when we're interpreting these things. Yeah, I mean, my take is I probably lean a little bit more towards Don's side, because whatever back in the culture of the Jewish times at these weddings, the wine, the alcohol, it wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't a stigma. It was just what you did. It was part of a wedding celebration. So what Jesus, the miracle where he would have turned water to wine, it wasn't controversial. It was looked at like, I can't believe he made the best wine we've ever tasted. And it's really weird that you save the best wine for last, right? That's part of the other part of the telling of the miracle. So yeah, I don't think we can know for sure exactly what it was like. I think we have some ideas when we talk about that the water wasn't always sanitary, that there was, I think, very likely some alcoholic content to the wine or to the things like that. But I just think it's always difficult when we try to understand the Bible and look at it just through today's culture and our lens of today. So that's all I was going to add.
Yeah, good, real good discussion there. Let's turn attention to Ephesians 5. So this is I think, a passage that we talked about a little bit during sanctification, but there is a link to, there's a direct call out to wine, and the comparison actually just in Ephesians 5:18, it says, "Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Holy Spirit." So, what do you guys think as far as that comparison, where it's talking about getting drunk with wine and then filled with the Holy Spirit? What does that call out as far as it relates to alcohol?
I'll say this. So if I can, I'll jump in first. So in a kind of a Bible study I've been doing with some others from our church, we've been going through First and Second Timothy, just looking at all the teachings there and what Paul was trying to tell Timothy. And there's a whole lot of it about reputation, about what your reputation's like in the community. What's Timothy's reputation? What's the church's reputation? And I think there may be some parallels there to this, where, is your reputation kind of that, debauchery, or you're known as the partier, or you're known as the guy or gal that really, likes to have a drink and do some things like that? Or is your reputation a little more geared towards, are you showing some of those fruits of the Spirit, being filled with the Spirit, having self-control, having things like that? And, I don't take it to mean don't have a drink. I like I said last week, I think that's okay, based on my understanding, and people that are smarter, and I would say more spiritual than me, what kind of the studies we've done on things. But I just think it has maybe a bit to do with reputation, about, what's your MO as you are, how you're known amongst other people. That would be my take.
So one of the thoughts I had here is that I think the question that I would ask is who is a better master? Is it the Holy Spirit, or is it this wine that this drunkenness that takes over? I think the comparison here is, you could even maybe flip the words around a little bit. Do not get drunk, do not get filled with wine, don't be controlled with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled up, be controlled by the Holy Spirit. So I think it's a comparison, and it's just a simple question, why would you allow alcohol to dominate your decision making, mind, ability to do a number of things, when you have the opportunity to be filled with the Holy Spirit? Why would you give that ability away to drunkenness, which leads to debauchery? So I think it's that simple comparison, and that is helpful there.
Let me just jump in real quick. I've preached through Ephesians a couple of times, and I've studied this out, and really that portion I believe Paul is using to talk about the Ephesian culture, because the culture in Ephesus was awful. They equated somehow, through their addition of gods. They had a pluralism in their worship. So they would add gods and not subtract them. They didn't see God as exclusive. They saw the need to kind of include all these gods. And with these gods came these practices and rituals. And one of the things that Paul talks about is the fact that, what we know about the city of and the city of Ephesus and the people, that they would be engaging in these drunken orgies because one of the gods' worship demanded that, and that was a way to be spiritual. So they equated sensuality and drunkenness with some type of spirituality. They were all seeking to be spiritual. However, the flesh combined with that really confused them in a way that, who would want to get out of that? If you were feeling unbelievable because you were drunk, unbelievable because you were having sex, and you had it all, and you were required to do this, and it was something that was just culturally acceptable, you didn't have to go looking for an affair. You didn't have to go, you could satisfy yourself in all kinds of ways. And Paul in chapter 4 starts with a very clear directive and says, look, you need to walk worthy of your calling. Chapter 5, he says, imitate me. And he says, to read the first verse, he says, follow God's example, therefore, dearly beloved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, that fragrant offering. And he goes on to speak of the unity of the body in chapter 4 and alludes to that in chapter 5. I think he's saying, in the cultural context, look, you guys know what it's like to be filled with all this other junk. You must be filled with Christ. And the picture of that, in my mind, is where that rests, to be filled with the Spirit, like you were trying to be filling yourself with all this other junk. And I think you can use that in different arguments in different ways. I'm not saying that this is the only exegetical way to interpret that, but I think it's a valid one.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for providing the context there. Very helpful with Ephesus and such. I think that was good. Moving on, a little bit longer passage in Proverbs, but I think it's important. We'll close with this one. Proverbs 23, verses 29 through 35. It says, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaining? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? Those who tarry long over wine. Those who go to try mixed wine. Do not look at wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup and goes down smoothly. In the end, it bites like a serpent and stings like an adder. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. You will be like one who lies down in the midst of the sea, like one who lies on the top of a mast. They struck me, you will say, but I was not hurt. They beat me, but I did not feel it. When shall I awake? I must have another drink. So just kind of throw that out there. It's kind of odd, after listing all these things, these negative things that happen, the person who is an alcoholic says, "Hey, when can I have another drink?" What does that tell us from a warning side about the dangers of alcohol?
Who wrote that passage? Is it David or Solomon? Do we know?
I did not see who wrote Proverbs 23. I can look it up while you're talking.
It's interesting. I mean, obviously, I think whoever it was, I think has a very clear understanding of the grip alcohol can have when they wrote that and penned that, because that's what it can do. I mean, it fills a void. It fills. Growing up, I never understood why someone would be alcoholic. I never understood why someone would be addicted to drugs. I never understood the allure. I never understood it. But having gone now 47, 46, I can't remember, 47, 6 years, I get it. I get it now. I get that if there is anything out there when you are in the darkest place that can fill that void, can make you forget something, can make you just for a moment relieve you of that pain that you're going through, you are going to do it. You're going to take it. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. You are going to take it. And obviously, having that passage read and saying, going right back to it, it's a potent addiction that has complete and utter control over you. And because of that, you are willing to throw away everything. You are willing to sacrifice everything. You are willing to, if it's just for 25 minutes, if it's just for 15 minutes, to experience something that is departed from what you are feeling at that moment, and you're willing to do it. And I think that whoever wrote that, I think understood that when he was writing that.
I think, Don, too, even the temptation that's attached to that too, because the temptation wages war as well, and that's a hard thing to just, get away from and to walk away from. And that can be just as difficult, which even leads to more maybe why, people just take that drink, and we're just gonna do it for a little while, and then that's it. I watched an interview with Brett Favre on Full Measure. I don't know if anybody watched that, but they basically asked him when he was taking all those pain pills and all the other things that were taking place. They were asking him, why were you doing that? And he said the same thing. It was like, when you were reading that, I was like, you know what? That's exactly what he said. He's like, I just wanted to get rid of the game for a while. I wanted to get rid of the pain. And he was going from, a couple pills to like, I need like 16 or 18 pills a day this guy was on. I mean, it was a ridiculous amount of opioids. And, again, I've not had to walk that battle, but you're right. The grip is there, and it is just consuming for some people. And unfortunately, it bites people and takes them out of their families, out of their homes, and completely destroys their life. And man, thankful that God in his grace allows us to make wise and discerning judgments, and calls us out of that, gives us relief from that temptation, or provides us a wife or somebody who is worth the accountability to stop and to not deal with that anymore, which God is gracious in providing in many people.
I've heard it expressed this way. It offers the addict a little hope in a hopeless world. It can really, it's just something there that's just alluring, and has that 15-20 minute kick that can give you what you need. But of course it doesn't satisfy. Nothing satisfies unless it's the blood of Christ. So.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I think last week when we introduced this topic, I think all of us acknowledged that nowhere does the Bible say having a drink of alcohol is a sin. But I think when you read a passage like this in Proverbs 23, you've got to recognize the potency that alcohol has. And is it a matter of, I know we used to joke around in college being goofy guys like, hey, you want to do something risky? Is it a matter of risk getting involved with alcohol? Is it a measure of wisdom needed when dealing with alcohol? I mean, just another thing that Proverbs talks about, there's so much wisdom in the book of Proverbs, but think about hanging out with a fool. I don't know if there's a point in Proverbs where the writer says you sin if you spend any time with a fool, but there's continual cautions against, hey, this is what's going to happen if you're going to hang out with fools. This is what's going to happen. You're going to run into all this despair. And that's the picture it paints of alcohol. And I think it's a stern warning. And for us, maybe not as risky. It's good to just say, I'm not going to risk it for whatever reason, and I'm going to play it safe. And that's the route I'm trying to stay on. And I really appreciate hearing from you guys, because we haven't even talked about the stumbling block issue that much, but I mean, you guys are some of my closest friends in the world, and our discussion last week, I don't know where all of you stood on these things. And if some of you are fine with social drinking, I wouldn't know that. You have not, that stumbling block issue has not been an issue, right, in terms of our relationship. So I do appreciate that. So I don't know, is it me because I'm a more cautious person by nature, or I'm just trying to figure out the line between a person's perspective, cautious versus risky, and what is wise according to the Proverbs.
And I think just to also that I think if there's just so many Christians out there that and we're kind of doing the same thing. We're kind of being responsible for the same thing of quick answering a yes or no, is it right or wrong? And I think that it can present the advocacy of drinking alcohol in almost like a cavalier way, and I don't think we're doing that here. But I think it's because we all know and we all would agree that just moderate drinking can lead to alcoholism. A little drinking can lead to alcoholism. We all would agree with that, I would think. And so I don't know. I just think that
It's interesting because you sorry, Don,
No, go ahead.
my connection was chopping up. I cut you off. Um, you look at the Nazarite vow, and then you go into the passages in the New Testament that talk about offices of the deacons and the pastor, and there's a stricter call for these people who are they even more set aside to the work of the Lord in terms of what they're hey, this is your expectation when it comes to alcohol. You shouldn't be dealing with it, right, or given to it. And that's the language used for these people who were, in a sense, more set aside for the work of the Lord. So I find that interesting too. Sorry, Don.
No, some great feedback. I think obviously the Bible's got even more to say on that, but just walking through those three passages, definitely a large amount of caution should be given. I think we would all agree when dealing with alcohol. And I think it's good. And again, in the next episode, we will talk about how do we apply this culturally in relationships. Ryan, you talked about it from a stumbling block perspective. How do we not only say what's right for us individually, but as we go out to get-togethers and to celebrations and to weddings and to get-togethers, how do we apply that so we can be living in a manner worthy of our calling? So definitely some good discussion there. All right, we're going to transition into Fix Your Eyes. We've been focusing on alcohol the past two episodes, and we're going to actually close out the alcohol topic, alcohol and the believer. And just want to pose a question, actually two questions, and you guys can interact how you want to on this. But how would you counsel a believer on these two questions? The first one you could answer is drinking okay in social settings or in locations where it's culturally normal? Different parts of the country, it might be more culturally appropriate or regular or normal. And then the second one is, how are we to interact with other believers who do believe it's okay to drink in social settings? How do we interact with those? So we'll just go, we're going to go Jeremy, Ben, Don, and Ryan. Then I'll close out on this one.
So I would counsel somebody, if they're going to go and they're going to go into a culturally a scenario where that is practiced. And I'll give you an example. My aunt and uncle are missionaries in France, and they're very conservative. And one of the things that they run into often is the social outings where wine is offered quite a bit. And so and I'm not going to say that I'm going to counsel them, but if it really, to me, it depends on where you're at. And it's not just if you're a missionary or not. If I'm in the US and I've got a friend of mine who I'm great friends with and I'm discipling, and he or she is going to ask, should I do this? I'm going to counsel them to default to the higher standard, whatever that is, to just default to the higher standard. And the reason I say that is because of my own personal struggle, but also knowing that you can never go wrong if you choose not to drink. Nothing can ever, as far as a testimony issue or something else that you would be opening a door to yourself and maybe some other things that might happen down the road or whatever the case. So and as I've matured and as I've grown in having to answer this, not only for my person, for me as a person, but for my family, and as I've counseled others who have struggled seriously with alcoholism and drinking and so forth, I'm going to counsel just to not do it. I think your testimony can be pretty strong without doing that, and you don't have to manipulate that. And again, I'm not going to condemn somebody who is choosing to do that in a responsible way, but I am going to counsel them to defer to a higher level and not drink. Secondly, the question, Matt, can you repeat the second question? I'm losing it for a second here.
No, it's all good. It's how are we to interact with other believers,
right,
who do believe it's okay? Like you might see them in a same setting.
So yeah, so if that's happening and they're choosing to do that, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to leave based on somebody who's responsible in doing that. But I'm also not going to necessarily make it a big deal and be like, well, I'm not going to do this and throw a big, to do about it and try to announce my my beliefs and my settings and try to make it a point where they have to, agree with me in that moment. I don't have to do that. I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for my own actions. And if that is going to lead me down a situation that is not good, and that is a potential struggle that is just feeding an appetite that I may or may not have, I'm just going to choose not to do that. But at the same time, I'm not going to leave and make a big deal about something that's taking place that's in a responsible way. There may be opportunities for conversations down the road with that individual, but I'm not gonna pursue something right then and there. I think that's probably inappropriate. If it's out of hand and there's something that is obviously out of control, then I need to be responsible and either take myself out of that situation or just, help calm somebody down and say, look, this we've gone a little bit too far, and maybe just offer that. And if that's not accepted, then that's my cue to leave. I'm not tied to that situation, or shouldn't be tied to that situation. So I'm going to counsel somebody to defer to a higher level. And I'll be in situations and have been in situations. I've got siblings and maybe others who are a little bit less, maybe have a little bit broader of a view of that. And I'm not going to think anything less of them. But right now in my life, I'm not going to participate in that side of things. A good Pepsi with grenadine or a nice orange Julius just does me just fine. And if I have to get a little tipsy, I'll go with the Vernors. Okay. But I don't need it for myself. And it doesn't bother me if it's there and it's in the responsible format.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Jeremy. Ben, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about, if somebody came and asked me, I would say they just need to make sure they spend the time considering what they're, kind of where they want to land on it, right? I guess maybe that's not a clear way of saying it, but you don't want to start making these decisions after it's more challenging to make these types of decisions after you're down the road a ways on it, so to speak. So if a person is coming and wanting to talk about it, I think it's important to, as we did a couple of weeks ago, try to find some of the passages in the Bible that speak to it in regards to alcohol or wine or the other things that, the verses and applicable situations we can find in the Bible. And if they come to the conclusion that, it's okay to do so responsibly, then I'm okay with that. And I would say, that's the position that I've landed on for me, that if, you have to be, you have to kind of settle on where you're going to view on it based, in the Bible of where you're going to land on if you should drink at all, and I guess that's part of it for me too. The question was drink in social settings. Well, if you're going to be okay drinking, to me, if you're to some degree, if you're going to be okay with having a alcoholic beverage at home, you should be okay with potentially having one out in a social setting. So, and there's maybe some nuance to that we could talk about if we really wanted to, but I think you just have to find what your conviction is. And then once you feel comfortable and feel like, based on your study, that's where your conviction lands, then that's what you should try to stick to. And as Jeremy said, if you've come to the conviction that, you're choosing for yourself not to, you just need to stick to that, not try to make it a big deal when you're out in public. I would agree with that, kind of like Jeremy said, but yeah, that's kind of babbled on a little bit there, but that's basically where I would land on it.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Don, how about you?
Well, I think this has been a great couple podcasts to discuss this, and I really appreciate you guys. It's what you guys have had to say, and especially for me growing up with this issue, and the mindset behind this. Growing up, it was, we were always taught, nope, it's a sin. Everybody who drinks is sinning, and we will not be taking part of it. And in my family, we had a side of the family that drank heavily, and we had another side of the family that didn't believe in drinking at all. So, I had two polarizing views on it. And in my mind, I guess, if you're looking at it, almost the idea that the abstinence was just about the litmus test for sanctification. If we go back to our sanctification ideas, I mean, the party line when I grew up is we are godly because we don't drink. And that idea, I thought, even maybe as extreme as it was a reality. And so I think the reasoning behind it is simple. Yeah, if you don't drink, you won't ever have to worry about abusing alcohol. And I think that's a decent argument. But however, I think in our day and age, in the last 20 years, we are in a grace, what I call a grace, I like to think about grace revolution. I've talked a lot about grace, and I love 1 Corinthians 10:23. If I'll go to a verse here, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything is constructive. Verse 24, it says, nobody should seek his own good, but the good of others. I think there's just too many Christians out there as far as, and if you give us a blanket statement and just blurt out, is drinking right or wrong, and we say yes or no, without really thinking through the complexities of the issue, because there's a ton of them. And I used to be one of those people who thought, yeah, the drink is wrong. If you're drinking, you're wrong, and to answer to the question, is it a sin? I think it all comes down to this for me. And after growing up, talking in the way I've been taught, and to fast forward to where I am today and what I've read on the Bible and what I believe it teaches, I think it's this. It comes down to this. I think if by drinking a glass of wine or a beer, I cause another Christian who may be a former addict or maybe have a tendency or a bent to be one, then the answer is yes, it is a sin. And I don't want to second guess it. I don't want to even try to go down that road or to attempt to turn down that road and cause my fellow Christian to sin. But if as a Christian, I'm sitting down to a dinner with my wife, with my friends, and have no fear or guilt about drinking a glass of wine, but have faith that God has given me the freedom to do so, then the answer is no, it is not a sin. And I'll just leave it with this verse, Romans 14:22 through 23. So whatever you believe about these things between yourself and God, blessed is the man who does not condemn himself by what he approves. But the man who has doubts is condemned if he eats, because his eating is not from faith, and everything that does not come from faith is sin.
Well, some good thoughts there, Don. Ryan, how about you?
I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll give a longer answer to the first question to kind of sum up my thoughts that I've shared on the previous podcast as well. So I think the second question was, if you're with a Christian friend who's drinking, how do you handle that situation? So I have been in that situation before. It was a bit shocking to me. I was surprised, and a friend of mine was just totally casual, like nothing was going on. And here I am thinking I'm with a person like-minded to me, and I'm staying away from alcohol. And I was surprised he's just casually, drinking these beers at a baseball game. But if it happens again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring my pen, and I'm just going to keep giving him that test with his eyes during the game, just to see how bad is this getting. And if I have to, I'll also wear a hoodie so I can just put the hood over my head. So that's how I'd handle that. Answer to the first question is this.
What a guy.
First question
bring a pocket breathalyzer.
I thought about it, but I don't have access to one. Maybe Hy-Vee will have one at their checkout line I can purchase next time I'm there.
30 cents.
So, yeah, as far as the first question, and again, just kind of wrapping up my views on this, I would say this is how I explain it to people now. To me, it's a matter of 3 F's as to why I'm staying away from alcohol. Number one, and this is, they're going from least importance to most important. The first F is finance. I mean, alcohol is spendy. I think it's, I don't even know. I don't think you can get alcohol for 30 cents. That much I know. All right. So there's a financial argument to be made against alcohol. The next tier of importance is there's a family aspect to it. So my dad was involved in alcohol. I know he was pulled over twice for DUI. And that, of course, that's a heavy charge. My grandpa on the other side of my family was an alcoholic. And I know at one point in time, he had predicted that someday I would be stumbling out of bars. And so I've always kept that in the back of my mind, realizing that on both sides of my family, there are problems. Alcohol has caused problems. And I've heard some of you talk about that in previous podcasts, how that has been a really an awakening for you, seeing how it can impact life when people get involved with alcohol. And so part of the other issue when it comes to family, for being my second F, is I'm also an example to my children. And I've got to think about, okay, let's say I become more lax compared to where I was growing up. Does that mean they'll become more lax as they grow up? Is there going to be a transitional period? All of us identified and said, hey, alcohol was a sin growing up. And now we've learned a little bit about what the Bible says, studied it out for ourselves, and maybe we're in a different spot. But I'm thinking about my family. So I'm learning from my forefathers, as it were. And I'm also thinking what's going to be best for those coming after me. And then, of course, the third F in my rationale, as I would explain to people, is faith. And I talked last time about how Proverbs is full of warnings against alcohol. We talked about the stumbling block principle. Some of you alluded to that already tonight, and I think that's a key issue. And Jeremy, I think it was you said, and I appreciated this, a higher standard. So I look back at Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I think about a similar situation they were faced with. And I want to see Christians be at a higher standard. I want to see them not just go with whatever is common in the world, whatever the world likes to do, because I've heard from more than one Christian who as an adult was saved. They've come out of the environment and they recognize drinking can no longer be part of my life. I'm identifying that as a worldly tool that belongs with the world. That is what is gripping them, and it does have a grip on the world. And so they've come out of that and they've said they've identified alcohol as a key component to that lifestyle. And so I guess that's where I'm at. And Romans 12 says we are not to be conformed to the world, but we're to be transformed. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I think they do a great job of giving us the importance of living at a higher standard. And so that's where I'm at. That's what I would advise if somebody were to ask me what a Christian should do with alcohol.
Yeah, no, certainly some good thoughts. I think as I would interact with that, I've had, my brother-in-law moved down to Louisville, Kentucky, where it is more culturally appropriate. It's kind of the bourbon trail. And so they do, he drinks, he drinks on a fairly regular basis. Obviously nothing that's out of control, but it for me, that's kind of brought up that cultural thing. Like, wow, is this, and I think Jeremy, you referenced was it your aunt and uncle are missionaries out in France, where perhaps wine is a normal thing that is drunk there. But I think as you take a look at it, for me, it's not an area of strict separation. Like if you drink, I can't have anything to do with you, those types of things. I don't feel like it's that level. It's more of one of control and what is best. And trying to keep in mind, different believers, views, backgrounds, history on that. I think we have to be very cautious on that. As we're entering into that, because as I just, found out a couple episodes ago, Don and Jeremy, it's been more of an issue for you guys, or certainly challenged at different points in your lives. I think it's just it goes to show you, it was never a thing for me. It doesn't make me any better than you guys, but like how, that is in my mind. So I think for me, it's a challenge. Let's get to know each other, before we're like flaunting stuff that may lead someone down a path. I think there's plenty of things that on the surface would be okay as long as they don't control you, but they could be very controlling. So again, just an encouragement to get to know believers, get to know family, understand what makes people tick. I think that's certainly critical. And then how to interact with other believers in social settings. I think your guys' answers pretty much summed up, my thoughts on that as well. And I think when you're in a social setting, I think it's, it's one to note, but again, unless it gets out of control, I think it's something that is not something to make a massive issue of, massive issue of there, as long as things are under control there. But again, I would probably probe some questions and just see if that's something that is a gateway or a path that you may just want to know about. So I think, like many things in the Christian life, it's an opportunity for us to again, I think, get to know each other a little bit more, and then ultimately remember, what is the goal on earth? Is it pleasure? Is it escape? Or pleasure in this things of this world? No, it's not. It's about knowing Christ and I think, Ryan, what you said, not being conformed to this world, but being transformed, knowing that our citizenship is in heaven. It's not of this world. So I think that plays into as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this focus on alcohol and the believer for the past 3 episodes. I think it's been enlightening, and hopefully it's been a help to you.